No one saw the moment coming. Not the traders in the city, not the bureaucrats staring at spreadsheets, not the men in faraway boardrooms who measure nations by the ton and the ounce. Somewhere in the granite ribs of the Burkinabe highlands, a 12-year-old shepherd named Nuru slipped on gravel and reached for balance, and history reached back. His palms slid over something sharp and brilliant. The thing in his hand was too cold for glass, too heavy for quartz, too alive with light to be anything ordinary. It didn't just sparkle, it seemed to breathe. Nuru ran downhill until his lungs burned, past acacia shadows and goats that scattered like beads. At home, his father Yakuba barred the door and blew out the lamp. They unwrapped the find on a fraying cloth, a diamond with a heart like lightning. They swore silence. For 3 nights, they spoke in whispers, slept with the stone beneath a bowl of grain as if it were a child. On the 4th morning, fear pushed them into action. Yakuba took the road to Zinier, where a market woman known for fairness, Madame Aisha, traded anything valuable and refused to deal with thieves. She did not shout when she saw the gem. She closed her hand and said a single name. Sanga. Within hours, a quiet convoy rolled toward the palace in Ouagadougou. At its center, Colonel Suleiman Sanga, a loyal strategist to President Ibrahim Traore, sat with the stone wrapped in a dull canvas that could not smother its glow. In a vaulted room paneled with faded maps, Ibrahim turned the rough jewel in his fingers. It was heavy with prophecy. "The earth is speaking," he murmured. Geologists arrived under cover of dusk, Dr. Mariama Dembele, Professor Bako, and a young metallurgist with notebooks full of equations. They drilled discrete cores miles from any mining lease. What the lab lights revealed was not merely size, it was clarity beyond any known seam in the region. Diamonds of almost surgical purity, stitched through the mountain like a constellation. Ibrahim called for a plan written in silence. Colonel Sanga mapped night routes. Brigadier Kader Ouattara organized perimeter rotations without radio chatter. The president himself rode in the second truck, hooded, unmarked, tires wrapped in burlap to hide their tread. Nuru, shaking but unafraid, guided them by landmarks older than maps. The split baobab, the sleeping lion ridge, the stream that sings after rain. At a barren slope where the wind tasted of metal, soldiers pried open the earth with patient hands. Lanterns steadied. Pickaxes stopped mid-swing. No one breathed. A vein the color of starlight stared back at them, crystals clustered like frozen rain, some so large the men looked away as though gazing into the sun. A private fell to his knees. "This could feed every child," he whispered, "and fix every roof." Ibrahim did not smile. He looked toward the black horizon, aware of the pattern older than independence. Whenever Africa finds its pulse, someone far away hears it and comes with a needle. "Seal the pads," he ordered. "Speak only in eyes and hands." They rigged makeshift tarps that did not reflect from satellites. They rotated trucks under tree canopies and covered footprints with thorny branches. Madame Aisha found women who could carry crates like bundles of firewood and look like gossiping neighbors while moving destiny down the road. The code name, Project Dawn, existed only on lips and never on paper. But secrets do not live alone. Somewhere, a sensor blinked at the wrong hour. Somewhere, a courier made 2 stops instead of 1. Somewhere, an algorithm in a foreign city saw an anomaly, a pattern of heavy objects moving in a place where the map said nothing was worth moving. The first whisper leapt oceans. The quiet turned electric. Ibrahim held the diamond again, feeling not greed but weight. The kind only leaders know. He closed his fist. "This is not treasure," he said to Sanga. "It is a test." That night, a single drone, small as a hawk, hummed over scrubland and vanished into clouds. In Geneva, a man with white hair and a smile like a closed knife, Eric Kastner, zoomed in on pixels and poured a drink that looked like melted gold. "Mobilize the Grey Vulture Consortium," he said. "Consultancies first, soldiers later. And by the border watchers a better future." In Ouagadougou, Ibrahim dialed a number committed to memory. "Zaina," he said when Dr. Zaina Ndiaye, a cyberforensic savant, answered from a small office lit by 3 mismatched lamps. The wind is changing. I need your firewalls to bite. Already hungry, she replied. But lions hunt better in packs. The child who had fallen from the trail slept under a reed mat. His father sat with a spear across his knees. And in the mountain, under tarps that whispered in the night breeze, Africa's oldest light waited to be fought over once again. Dawn rose thin and gray, and with it came men who existed in the spaces between lines, consultants who never used last names, security trainers, who never said which country, and investors, whose watches kept 3 time zones. They gathered first in hotel lobbies, polite smiles, briefcases fat with offers. Then came the calls to ministries, the invitations to public-private partnerships, the promises of roads if the mountain was rationalized. Burkina Faso had heard such music before. It always came with drums of fuel and quiet warehouses full of uniforms that did not belong to any flag. Ibrahim met Colonel Sanga and Brigadier Ouattara in a windowless room where old ceiling fans turned like tired vultures. On the table lay satellite prints Zaina had decoded, stitched into a mosaic, unregistered aircraft refueling in a neighbor's dry lakebed. Vehicles crossing at night with medical aid, labels and no medical manifests, and a trickle of encrypted messages all routed through a Swiss server farm infamous among people who never appear in photographs. We are not just dealing with companies, Zaina said, pushing her glasses up with an ink-stained knuckle. This is a stack, capital, mercenaries, a few retired colonels with new business cards, and at least one intelligence service testing the water with a toe. Ibrahim looked from map to faces. The mountain is not a trophy, he said. It is a mirror. It shows us who we are. And it shows them who they have always been. At the edge of the highlands, an equipment convoy rolled through thorn scrub. The driver sang to keep fear small. Halfway to the ridge, the road erupted, first shrapnel, then whistles, then flames that bent sideways in the wind. The ambushers wore scarves and silence. When the shooting ended, there was one survivor, a kid from Kaduga named Issouf who crawled through gravel with a message in his teeth. They knew the curve before we turned it. On the palace terrace, Ibrahim listened without blinking. Leak, he said. Sanga nodded once, as if the word had been waiting in his pocket. They tightened circles. Background checks went from careful to merciless. A few officers bristled, a few resigned, one disappeared. The palace kitchen served simpler meals and counted sacks of flour. Zaina cut all wireless routing near the mountain and built a mesh of wired lines old enough to be unfashionable, and therefore safe. Sometimes the newest lock is the first one the thieves learn, she said with a half-smile. Foreign pressure turned public. A Luxembourg fund threatened a lawsuit larger than the country's education budget. A former ambassador tweeted that resource nationalism would harm the Burkinabe themselves. The phrase echoed like a lecture no one wanted to hear again. People in the markets rolled their eyes and kept buying millet. Their children now played a game called Guard the Hill. Ibrahim visited Nuru and his parents at night, without cameras. He crouched on a woven mat, spoke to the boy about goats and gravity, then shifted to reality. They may knock at your door with a smile. He told Yakuba. Let no smile buy your silence. We will not ask your family to be brave, we will be brave for you. On a ridge, Brigadier Ouattara walked patrol, boots chalked by dust, eyes tracking shadows. His sergeant pointed at a tongue of smoke on the horizon. Farm burn, the sergeant said. Or signal. Ouattara answered. In Geneva, Kastner met men who smelled of leather seats and indifference. He spoke in short, expensive words. Stability, governance, energy offtake, downside protection. One of the men with the indifference bent forward and said the only thing that mattered. Can you take it without fingerprints? Kastner's smile did not move. We already have a contractor on retainer, he said. They call themselves night swifts on paper, gray vultures in the field. They pose as tourists when needed. And they send condolences to nobody. Meanwhile, at a border crossing shaded by rusted awnings, a convoy marked, humanitarian relief, declared syringes and blankets. The customs woman lifted a canvas flap and found rifle grease thick as honey, crates of optics wrapped in hospital tape, and mortar tubes labeled water filters. She sent a text to a number that had no name. 10 minutes later, a detachment quietly relieved the convoy of its lies. Ibrahim convened a midnight council. The room smelled of ink and old coffee. Dr. Zaina traced a finger along a string of intercepted signals. "They're pushing scouts toward the outer ravines," she said. "The chatter uses construction metaphors, surveyors, geotechnical sampling, slope analysis. But they mean kill zones. They will strike soon and disguise it as anti-terror operations if anything goes public. Then we must be ready for 2 battles," Ibrahim replied. "The one the bullets fight, and the one the narrative fights." He ordered the mountain perimeter expanded and redesignated not as a mine but a national research reserve. The paperwork whirred overnight through civil service channels like a river redirected. He ordered village elders contracted to supply meals for soldiers, cash paid same day, receipts stamped with the seal of the state. "If our people feed the defense, they will own the defense," he told Sanga. "No hungry garrison wins a righteous war." Night deepened. A goat bleated, then silence folded back. A drone made of foreign carbon skimmed treetops, hunting for heat. It found decoys warming by small braziers and reported bodies where there were none. Zaina watched it on a scrambled feed and smiled thinly. "Eat what you like," she whispered. "I chose the menu." In the city, rumors yellowed and peeled. Some said the president was mad, others said he had seen a star fall. What most said was simple. He stands, so we stand. The orders that would change the next morning flew in quiet suits from quiet rooms with no flags on the wall. They bore no signatures, only expectations. It began just before first light, that hour when the sky is undecided and the birds have not voted. A wash of wind, then rotors. Night swifts came in low from 3 valleys, blades combing the scrub. Their pilots kept shadows, their gunners kept rhythm. On the ground, shapes spread into textbook formations, professional, patient, sure of a quick victory taught to them in places far from dust. "Positions," Brigadier Wadara said into a wire handset that hummed like an old beehive. The perimeter opened and closed like a set of lungs. Minds buried days earlier chattered like teeth in the ground as the first wave of mercenaries pressed forward and paid tuition. Ibrahim moved along the inner line, not as a symbol but as a field captain. He spoke with eyes as much as words, tapped shoulders, lifted a fallen man's rifle and set it upright as if it were a flag. When the first rocket struck a ridge and coughed stone down the slope, he didn't flinch, he counted. From the blast to the shout to the reply, discipline is a kind of music. A crack like ice splitting a lake sang past his ear. He dropped behind a drum of sand and traced the bullet's line back to a boulder lit too perfectly by dawn. He borrowed a marksman's scope, breathed in the dust, exhaled rage, and stitched a full stop where the shooter's sentence had begun. "Clear," he said, to no one in particular, to everyone. Underground, in a small cavern that smelled of damp and iron, Dr. Zaina translated chaos into maps. She listened to enemy radio posts bounce off troposphere and die. Between calls, she heard something wrong, the rhythm of insider timing. The mercenaries were not guessing, they were arriving at weak points just before they hardened. "We have a leak inside the ring," she told Sanga on the hard line. "Not rumor. Telemetry." Sanga's mouth hardened. "I will peel this onion now." He sent 2 men he trained personally, a gentle medic named Amadou and a quiet captain named Sor, to quietly audit badges and positions. Within an hour, Amadou returned with a torn patch and a face like thunder. "Sor is gone," he said. "His locker is empty. He left 20 minutes before dawn." On the ridge, the mercenary advance slowed but didn't break. Their commander, a woman with a scar she never explained, swung her hand in a circle, and the helicopters pivoted to hammer the east saddle. Dust and shrapnel whirled into a tornado of noise. Ibrahim's men hugged rock and listened to their training instead of their fear. "Pull to the second line," Ibrahim ordered. Let them have the first teeth, then bite behind. It worked for an hour, then for 2, then began to fray. Ammunition feels heavier when you have less of it. A lifter truck lit up like a bad idea and burned where it stalled. Ibrahim moved again, dragging a wounded radio operator behind a berm while a gunner laid a curtain of defiance across the slope. In the village below, Nuru crouched with his mother Awa behind a half wall, rattled but unbroken. A small drone buzzed over the market like a fly that knew too much. Nuru saw its blink and pointed. 2 plainclothes sentries raised a camouflage net, and the drone's view found only shadows. Moments later, gunfire sparked at the village edge. The sentries answered in crisp bursts, and the handful of infiltrators who had come dressed as traders learned too late that a village is not a disguise, it is an army in waiting. Back at the ridge, Sanga and Wadara converged on a soldier dragging a captured mercenary who wore a tattoo of a folded wing. "Grey vulture?" Wadara asked. The captive smiled with a tooth that wasn't his. "I like your stones," he said in a French so smooth it did not belong to him. "Where is Sor?" Sanga asked. The man shrugged. "The one who draws your lines. He draws ours now." News moves inside a body like lightning. Ibrahim swallowed it without blinking. "Then we erased the lines he drew." He stepped into the cave and looked over Zaina's shoulder. She had already found it, a ghost channel piggybacking on a maintenance frequency that no one had updated because no one remembered it existed. "He's smart," she said. "But he isn't clever." She traced the signal to a waypoint camera above the north cut, and to a tiny drive tucked behind its mount. "Pull it and jam him," Ibrahim said. They went out in a 4-man team under a sky scabbed with smoke. Twice they had to flatten into scrub while a helicopter sniffed for them. At the post, a thin corporal named Ryogo shimmied up the frame like a lizard and popped a panel with a pocket knife his grandfather had used to harvest millet. The drive came away in his palm like a bad tooth. Zaina slammed a dead channel through every maintenance line, and in faraway headphones a mercenary tech heard a hiss he didn't understand. Momentum shifted like a herd. The mercenaries pressed again. Ibrahim's men bent, and then found steel. Sniper nests woke up one by one like stars at evening. A rocket team that had played dumb all morning came to life and swatted a helicopter from the air, its spinning carcass skidding into a ravine that had a name the maps didn't know. By late afternoon, the night swifts bled men and time. Their commander barked for one last push, an avalanche of smoke grenades and suppressive fire. Ibrahim saw it coming the way farmers feel rain. "Inside line," he ordered. "Cave mouth. Bring them into the throat." They did. The fight narrowed to echo and flash. Grenades thumped. Rifles coughed. Someone shouted a prayer that sounded like a lullaby. When it ended, the hill still belonged to the people who had named it. The mercenaries melted back into shadow and radio static. On a slab of cool stone, Ibrahim sat with Nuru and Awa and drank water that tasted of tin and victory. "Why do they want the stones so badly?" the boy asked. "Because they are terrified of what it means if we keep them," Ibrahim said. "It means we will no longer ask for permission to live." That night, Zaina and Sanga interrogated the drive. In an office full of wires, their faces flickered blue. Names unraveled. Accounts whistled. The line ran outward. Geneva to Tangier to Malta to men who never wrote emails because they paid people to remember for them. And somewhere, in a glass tower with carpets that swallowed footsteps, Eric Kastner watched his balance sheets begin to shiver. He set his glass down and made a call that wintered the room. Phase 2. By morning, the gunfire was replaced by microphones. Not on the ridge. There, soldiers cleaned weapons and counted friends. But everywhere else. A leak that wanted to be a flood splashed into newsroom inboxes. Blurry footage of tarps lifting in mountain light. Stills of crystals that looked like ice sculpted by angels. Audio of a president saying, "Not for sale." The world loves a secret more the second it's not a secret. A channel in London ran the story as unverified. A channel in Paris called it worrying for investors. A channel in New York called it resource nationalism. Which is what people say when the resources are not theirs anymore. But on TikTok and Wahaguya and Facebook and Bobo and WhatsApp everywhere, the caption was simpler. Look! Ibrahim had planned it that way. The night before, he ordered government drones, not foreign eyes, to film only the veins and the faces of miners paid by the state to guard them. No fortifications, no maps, nothing to help someone draw a better blueprint of theft. Just proof, the mountain was real, and it already had owners, the people. They will say we are incompetent, he told Sanga. They will claim we can't manage our own wealth. So we will show our competence. Food contracts paid on time, clean clinics near the site, school buses that run before soldiers sleep. Receipts became strategy. A portable sawmill whined beside the road, turning timber into desks for a schoolhouse that rose like a promise. A clinic tent with a cold box hummed with vaccines. Local seamstresses sewed uniforms for new site guards and stitched their names onto pockets. Each invoice stamped and photographed, each vendor smiling with the kind of pride that makes counter-narratives stutter. Abroad, the counter-narrative did not stutter, it snarled. Anonymous briefings to select journalists whispered of militarization, child labor, unsafe practices. A think tank paper, written by a man whose last job was at a bond fund, suggested international stewardship. In Geneva, Kastner gathered a circle and slid a folder marked Public Hygiene across the table. Fill sticks, he said. Find some. Zaina anticipated it. She set up a mirror of her own, an open dashboard that showed spending near the mountain down to the bale of rice and the last fuel drum. She posted twice daily procurement updates and invited civil society groups, some unfriendly, to audit random deliveries. Sunlight is brutal, but it is clean, she told her team. Let them call us what they like. We will answer with numbers. The diaspora heard the numbers and the song beneath them. In Marseille and Accra and the Bronx, shopkeepers taped photos of the ridge to windows. DJs dropped samples of Ibrahim's line. Not for sale. Between beats, painters sprayed murals of a boy holding a star while men in suits reached and grasped air. Old heads who remembered Sankara nodded slowly. Young hands typed faster. Gray vultures went from stealth to spectacle. They hired the same PR firms that sell winter coats and wars. The firms pitched op-eds with polite phrases about best practices and shared prosperity. Ibrahim's communications team did not write op-eds. They live-streamed school registrations near the site and posted a spreadsheet that showed the first 10 million francs of Diamond Zone revenues spent on textbooks, not weapons. Commenters did the rest. But the story war had a darker front, the one where lies are carried by gunships. Kastner's Phase 2 was not tweets, it was turbines. Satellite images showed helicopters staging 3 valleys away under tarps stretched like old hides. They will frame the strike as counterterrorism, Zaina warned. It's a script they know by heart. Then we will write a different ending, Ibrahim said. He called a continental circle, neighbors, notaries, skeptics. Emissaries arrived quietly, and climbed to a ledge above a valley that had tasted smoke. They wore suits, robes, fatigues. Ibrahim showed them the veins with their own eyes. He handed out summary pages of the spending dashboard printed on cheap paper that flapped like birds. He didn't ask for speeches. He asked for eyes. If they come, he said, and they will, I want you to witness who refuses theft and who excuses it. One visitor, a minister with a tired smile, tucked the papers into his pocket as if tucking in a child. They will call you reckless, he told Ibrahim. They will call you many names before they call you right. Ibrahim laughed once, without humor. I have been called worse by better, he said. In the command cave, Sanga mapped the next choice points with chalk that broke and fell in pale hunks. They will overfly the outer line and attempt to land inside the bowl, he said. We must make the bowl bite. Let them taste their own press release. Wadara muttered, tapping the map where the slope could be triggered into sliding. Zaina slipped a last card into the deck. Fake calms seated on the same public hygiene channels Kastner's team loved to scrape. They told a fiction that sounded like the truth, That Burkina's defenders had shifted to the north saddle and left the west chute undermanned. It was a lie built to be overheard. It was overheard. When the night swifts came again, angrier and heavier, they chose the west chute like good students who study the wrong chapter. The first squad reached a ledge that looked like a table. The table collapsed. Stone roared like an ocean. The mercenaries who survived the slide stumbled into a basin where every rock already had a name and a sideline on it. The cameras rolled, not foreign, but Burkinabe. Images went not to New York but to Ouaga and then to the world from there. A defending soldier dragged a wounded man from the debris, handed him water, and said the line that would be clipped into 20 languages. "This hill feeds children. We will not trade them for contracts." In Geneva, a screen froze on that frame. Kastner set down his glass harder than before. "Enough storytelling," he said. "Endgame." The endgame came in 3 strokes. Air, money, and shadow. The air was obvious. Another strike package, deniable but loud. The money was quieter, accounts routed through islands, debts bought for leverage, a rumor of a downgrade whispered into ratings' ears. The shadow was a last play, a team aimed not at the mountain but at the man. They moved at 3:17, when even worries sleep. A small unit slipped through a drainage cut used by goats. A second team floated mouths of silencers over the eastern path. A third parked a van with clean plates 3 streets from a safe house and waited like hunters who believe the forest owes them meat. They met something they did not expect, neighbors who did not owe them silence. An old woman who sold peppers saw a man kneel where only children kneel to tie shoes. She dialed a number painted on the clinic tent. 2 young brothers who fixed bicycles heard boots on gravel and tapped a code on a metal pole with a wrench. In the command net, the pole's vibrations became pings. The pings became positions. Sanga's quick team folded the cut shut with men and rope. Wadara flipped a switch and turned a quiet gully into a noisy mistake. One capture bit his lip until it bled and said nothing. Another stared at the ground and said, "I was told this was an abandoned site." He said it in a tone men use when the lie is for themselves. While the teams collided in dust, Dr. Zina did to accounts what gravity did to stones. The hard drive pulled from the waypoint weeks before had been a key. With it, she walked the shadow web like a shepherd in a thorn field. The list that emerged read like a black sermon: shells, fronts, Karen feeding payouts to journalists, payments to a consultancy in Dubai that specialized in transitions, a grant to a minerals governance NGO, registered to a mail drop. In the middle of it all, names she did not expect. Junior officials in regional offices, a deputy in a ministry who attended every ribbon cutting, a banker who had tutored her cousin in algebra. Ibrahim read the list once and did not blink twice. "Arrest those within our law," he told the justice minister. "Publish what can be published. Ask our neighbors to honor their own laws for the rest." He did one more thing. He called the press, not the ones invited to hotel lunches, but the hard-nosed domestic reporters who ride motorbikes and ask rude questions. He gave them time access, documents that smelled like fresh ink and fear. "Do your job," he said. "If I am wrong, say it. If I am right, say it louder." Across the borders, something unusual happened. One prosecutor in a capital usually bored by African cases found her inbox flooded with mutual legal assistance requests from 3 countries in a single hour, each carrying the same names and the same routing numbers. She raised an eyebrow and lifted a phone. A Swiss magistrate who disliked being played found a wire into a villa lease paid in cash. His dislike became a warrant. Eric Kastner's life got smaller in one day. His office door stayed shut. His lawyer's mouth stayed open. His plane did not leave. When the knock came, it was polite but final. In handcuffs that did not match his suit, he saw the one thing men like him fear more than poverty: public light. In Ouagadougou, the court convened under a ceiling fan that had seen 3 administrations. The evidence did not shout, it piled. Payments to mercenaries disguised as survey teams. Emails with subject lines like hospitality that were anything but. A briefing note in crisp English explaining how to frame a strike as anti-terror support, should anyone ask inconvenient questions. From the back row, a grandmother with a faded dress whispered, "They always said we were poor. Look how rich their lives are." Kastner took the stand with a calm that had cost him money to practice. He said he funded charities. He said he respected sovereignty. He said the diamond claims were unproven, though his own files argued for provenance leverage. When shown a memo in his handwriting ordering a terminal solution for key obstacles, he said the words were figurative. The room did not applaud, it simply remembered. Ibrahim did not sit in the front. He stood near a door like a schoolteacher watching a hallway. When it was his turn, he spoke 12 sentences and sat down. They were not about diamonds. They were about oaths. "The first oath I took," he said, "was as a boy to tell the truth. The second was as a soldier to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The last was to our Constitution. All three belong to the same house. We are repairing its roof." The verdict did not heal the dead or calm the living, but it did something rare: it made sense. The network was convicted: crimes against the peace, conspiracy, attempted subversion, financial predation. Sentences were long enough to feel like time and not like theater. On the mountain, the wind changed. Work restarted under rules written on one page and posted at the gate. No child labor, no night blasting, no payments in cash, no gifts to officials, audits posted monthly in the market where tomatoes were sold. The first revenue did not buy medals, it bought school roofs. A nurse in a white coat hung a sign over a new clinic bed, paid by stone, for life. Nuru came up the slope with Ibrahim, and coughed at the dust. "Will they come back?" he asked. "They always do," Ibrahim said. "But so do we." The boy held up a small flag Awa had stitched, green, red, gold, and the cloth trembled in a breeze that smelled of rain. Below them, trucks moved slowly, paperwork in their glove compartments, receipts in their dashboards, a country learning how to be not poor in the only way that matters, with discipline. At a summit called in a hall with a leaky roof, leaders from neighbor states arrived without orchestras. They looked at the spending dashboard on a projector that dimmed and flickered. They ate rice and stew at long tables like schoolchildren. They listened while Ibrahim said the thing that made a few of them shift in their chairs. "Sovereignty is a budget before it is a slogan." When the session ended, they signed, not an alliance with trumpets, but a memorandum with teeth, joint patrols around resource corridors, shared auditing teams, a pooled legal defense fund for lawsuits filed in foreign courts, a promise to name anyone who took bribes and to ban them from the next government too. The mountain glinted under cloud. Cameras turned off. Work songs replaced war cries. And somewhere far away, a man who had never been to Africa turned off a television and stared at his reflection in a blank screen, trying to decide whether the world had changed without asking him. In Burkina Faso it had.